Would you like to, the architect like to respond to any of these comments?
Good evening. My name is Young Kim with HLJ. I'm the architect of the project. I'd like to just make an explanation about two things. Oak tree for the back. I think the planning department already aware of that issue. So in the process, we identify the issues and check with the arborists. They give us the minimum setback requirement, which is 20 feet. So we address that distance in our setback. And the second is height. I think there's a lot of misleading, so I just want to point it out. Architect drawing 50 feet, that's really from the basement. We put it on the, on the left side, from the top of the main entry, which is already 10 feet higher land from the left side, and then only the entry. So if you not count the one on the left side, it's about 35 feet from the ground level. That's including sloped roof that we put, trying to plan the architecturally. If you take out the roof line, it's only 32 feet. And then on the corner, red and blue side, we lower the building as a 25 feet. So that's what we point out. So then, we added a couple of gable roof, trying to enhance the architectural feature. That was we included. If we don't include their area, all the area from the ground, it's only 35 feet. So I just want to point it out.
Could I ask you another question while you're there? Perhaps I didn't review the plans thoroughly enough, but there was a comment about the equipment on the roof. How are you handling equipment for the project?
Most of the rooms doesn't have a mechanical unit. Only all the room has a window unit, which calling the VTEC. VTEC is going to be part of the window system. Only unit that are going to on the roof is the hallway air conditioning. That's very small. That's why we have a sloped roof. It will be hidden behind it. It's not going to see from the end of the street.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
It's a PTAC unit, which is a neutral unit.
Each unit would have a VTAC. It's not actually a PTAC at this hotel. It would be a vertical unit in every individual hotel room. So they're not even the ones underneath the windows or anything like that. And all the public spaces in the hotel would be central air, and that'd probably be a couple of coolers on the bottom or the top, and it wouldn't obstruct anything you see today. There's probably a little parapet that's up there. There's probably you have enough room to put some AC units, HVAC units up there.
Okay, and there was also a question about solar power. Are you?
At this point, we don't have any intentions with solar, but I mean, all these new Title 24 laws and whatnot, that's all ever changing. At this point, what we see here is what we're going with.
Okay. Well, I'm going to ask because I'm concerned about appearance.
Yeah, exactly. And what we're proposing right here, right now, is no solar.
Okay.
And one more question. About the height. I want to really make it clear, though. When you come to this building, there's no really a point you can look up to it. It's going to be higher than 35 feet, the wall itself. Only part of the building where you can go up to it and see a wall that's higher than 35 feet from where you're standing is the entryway. And the reason why it's higher on numbers is because we're putting a gable rooftop on it. And I think the reason why we're asking for a relief in height is so we can have a superior design of the hotel. We're not really asking for a 40 foot for our own sake, for more space or for more rooms or anything of that sort. We're doing so the hotel itself is aesthetically more pleasing. I really want to urge that to everyone here. We're not asking for a height relief to put more space into the hotel. It's more of so it looks better for everyone. It's a mutual beneficial thing, I believe.
What's your name?
One more question. There was a comment about signs.
Yeah.
Now, I know you haven't selected.
Right. To be honest with you, I'm not sure what the procedure is on that. I don't know if that's a different staff. I'm not Sure.
You know, if you have thoughts on the sign, you can share those now, but the sign program would come back as part of the subsequent detailed analysis, should the project proceed to plan commission and city council.
Okay, that's what I was thinking, that there is a program.
Okay, yeah, so when that comes up, I guess we'll have to go through that process.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Could I ask a question of the landscape architect? There was a good question that came up about the size of the wetland. Could you sort of explain, well, to me,
So
because I don't understand that.
The way that it was measured is based on the vegetation, and that's how you determine whether that is a wetland ecosystem, based on the existing vegetation there, which was already impacted very much by the cows living there, but there was an assessment done, and that's how they delineated the wetland. So it's not based on how much water was on it, because water fluctuates. It's based on the existing vegetation.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I can also check them out. The U.S. Army Engineer Corps, they delineate these wetlands, this is their jurisdiction. And the last time it was done, it was re-evaluated, I think, 2 years ago or 3 years ago. I'm sorry, I can't tell you exactly, but it was done a long time ago, and then they redid it just to go re-verify it. And then that stands for another X amount of years. And we're still within those amount of years as we speak today.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question for staff. Can you provide clarity on how we measure building height in relationship to the hillside ordinance?
From the finished grade, existing or finished grade, whichever is greater. In this case, I think it's the actual finished grade, just taken from the base of the building.
From the base of the building, regardless of where it is on the site, to the highest point, even if it's
Correct.
not in that part. So, thank you.
So can I follow up? So if the lowest point is over here and the highest point's over here, you measure that. Is that right? Or is it or do you drop a plumb bob from every spot on the roof to existing or finished grade?
In this instance, it's a plumb bob.
From any point on the building, straight down.
Straight down, correct.
Okay, that's a conventional way to measure it.
We got a 53-foot pump out there.
Correct.
Which is at the gable.
So that's the worst case, right? The worst case. It's not an averaging,
That would be the extreme case.
okay.
So the gable is 17 feet high, is that what you're saying?
I think I have to quite one more time. That 52 is from the lowest point. So if it's plumb, I think it's 43.
At the extreme case, so from the lowest point to the ridge to the highest point.
Yeah, to the ground.
So
Yeah, I'm sorry, I missed the observation about, yeah, if you were to draw the two horizontal lines at the lowest and the highest point, it's the 52, 50.
Yeah, and then again, if we take out that gable, everything is under 45.
So the 52 is from the highest gable to the lowest basement
Yeah.
floor.
Yeah, so
That's
that's
not a line. If you drop from the gable down, you hit the parking lot level, which
That's
is a
the
story
40.
above that level.
right,
Which is 40 what?
41. I believe.
41, so 6 feet over
Yeah,
the allowed.
and then other than that, all the roof line is less than 35.
Right, thank you.
Okay, does anyone else have any questions?
Maybe just a little more question for the developer, the architect about parking. It says on here 87, maybe 95. We have 87 spots
Right.
and 87 rooms. Where does staff park?
So I think we have 87 spots.
Yeah.
Yeah. So 87 is a 1-to-1 ratio.
Right.
That's the industry standard. That's also the Novato ordinance. It's the hotel industry standard as well. And the reason behind that is really simple for two reasons. The first reason for employees and stuff, whatnot. A hotel operates very differently than most businesses. We have a lot of employees in the mornings, which all of the customers are checking out. So at 3 p.m. when everyone's checking back in, that's when all the housekeepers are leaving. At no given time in this hotel of this size will we have more than maybe, I'm going to say about 10 to 13 employees at one time. At evening times, we'll probably have around 2 employees, 2 to 3. And the second reason for even Low Spring employees not to have 90 parking spaces is because it's an industry standard, just knowing that one occupied room on average is taking up 0.8 spaces in a hotel like this. So, for example, a family will come in a van, they'll take up 2 rooms, and that in itself is 2 rooms in just one parking spot. So if we have say, 100% night that are, for example, 87 rooms, only really 80% of those parking spaces will be taken. We'll have another, say, around 20 parking spaces that are completely empty. And that's because it's just that's how parking works at hotels. The other thing is, I mean, we're not always full at all times. That's something else to remember. So that's the reason we
I would
have.
have 2 points to that. If you are, what do you do?
Well, like I said,
Because maybe some people also come in 2 cars that skews your
Well,
average too. So
right.
if you have to have 1-to-1, what if there are, and it fills up, where do the employees park? And if you're saying it's never gonna fill up, then why have so many? Eliminate a few rooms if it never fills up. Thank you everyone for showing up. A lot of good comments. I appreciate it. Let me go through, run off my notes. A couple of them maybe a little bit of questions or something, but mainly observations in no particular order. The entrance, at one time at the last meeting, I commented how I would like to see the entrance a little more welcoming rather than a, I don't know, 35-foot high vertical box with at the corner. And I see you stuck a little trellis element on there, but that's not a strong element to me. That was a little weak effort, I thought. I meant more like architecturally stepping it back. Having a first floor, stepping back, seeing a little roof and seeing some building back there. So you don't have that very tall vertical element right when you come in, you're confronted with it. So I don't see that as working so well. Oaks, on the landscape plan, you planted a few oaks around between the parking and redwood. And I heard your point about how you wanted to make it seem more natural, and so you're scattering them around like everywhere else, but you're allowing a view to an unnatural thing, a building. So I would rather see more oaks and less building than trying to keep the spacing match the bare hills. I think you could put more oaks in between the parking and redwood. The buckskin color to me looks a little light, and I know when it gets to be and maybe even with some of this stone work also, when it gets to be bigger, it gets even lighter somehow. It's hard to tell from a little sample. We often have a piece of plywood painted out on the site to really appreciate the color. But I'm afraid if you go a little darker in all these color selections, I think it would not stand out quite so much, both in the buckskin and in the brick. I understand we're going to come back probably for the art. Little note, the fountain down by the pool seemed redundant because you've already got a big water feature there. It seems like it'd be more effective near the entry. And the last elephant in the room is the height. I really don't like the height. I think asking for 17 feet or 14 feet, whatever it is, over is unacceptable. Your argument that it's only the gable roof, you're not really increasing anything, will bring the gable roof down below the height. You're going to lose some rooms or something, but that's the price. It's a very sensitive site, but that's not an excuse to get a variance for the height limit, I don't believe. It's just one more thing. You're trying to max out the floor area ratio, and the site is not appropriate for it. You referred to, in trying to make an exception for it, a case for it, you referred to the Fireman's Fund and some other adjacent buildings, but those were before the Hillside Ordinance. So they could have even been part of the reason the Hillside Ordinance became a Hillside Ordinance. So I don't think you should be allowed to go by those standards from the past. You need to go by the current standards. In saying that, though, the people comment like they enjoyed seeing the cows in the pasture, but you can't keep that unless you buy the lot. You can't demand that. But I think the neighbors are entitled to have the owners stick to the regulations, the hillside regulations. That's a reasonable expectation, I think. So there are a lot of things that I think can be adjusted on the building. It's not a bad building, but simply because the height limit is way in excess of the existing regulations, and it's a major part of the building, I'm not going to be able to support the project.
Well, again, thank you everybody for coming out today and for your presentation and the work you've done today. As we noted during the workshops, it is a difficult site plan. You have a lot of limitations, which makes it very, very difficult for anything to work well. And I think you've done the best job that you could, given the limitations. I also really appreciate everybody's concerns, being a neighbor and what this means to them. The issue of the appropriateness of use is not within our purview, so we really cannot comment on that. That falls within the Planning Commission and the Council. I would agree with my colleague in terms of the landscaping. Whatever we do there, really, it seems light. If you're going to do this, if it does move forward, you're going to have to do a lot with landscaping to really maximize the beauty of it and to enhance the beauty of the neighborhood if it moves forward. Discussion of the colors, if it comes back, I'm always a stickler of seeing actual samples on the site before we make a decision on that. And back to that, the two elephants in the room. One is the height, and the other being the wetlands. I cannot get past the issue of the height. Those guidelines were put in place for a reason. They were carefully and thought out. And as Michael said, the neighbors it's a reasonable assumption for them that you follow the guidelines that appear there. Most guidelines, most zonings make sites much denser than they normally are, and people have to live with them. In this particular case, you need to live within the limitations of the guidelines. When it comes to the wetlands, I gotta say I'm kind of at a loss here because I do believe in protecting wetlands, but I don't know enough about the implications here to speak or to even make a decision or a recommendation based on that. The height alone, I cannot support the project.
I'd like to kind of reiterate what my previous colleagues said, and I appreciate all of you coming out. This is an unusual project, and the nature of that neighborhood, while I do know it's been this pasture for a long time, there's definitely a precedent of commercial business in that neighborhood. I mean, you go further up Wood Hollow Drive and you see more commercial buildings up there, and you have fireman's fund on the side. So while I know you appreciate the nature of that parcel, personally, I use Mount Riddell all the time. I wish there was no homes up on that hillside in Partridge Knolls, but that's not reality. This is a parcel that is closer to 101, and I think there is it's appropriate for something to go there. Whether this project goes there or not is what we're discussing. Site-wise, once again, this is a really challenging site that has lots of constraints. From the wetland to the PG&E to the hillside. And I think considering that the workshops we've gone through, I think the applicant has done a very good job of addressing our concerns and making a project that works there. Now, whether hotel is appropriate there or not is a question I think more for the Planning Commission than the City Council. I really do appreciate, I think it was what Melissa and others had to say about it. But really we're here to talk about the architecture. So that said, I think they've handled the site well. The massing and the height is I think for the most part, if you look at that site, I've seen the story poles. I think the story poles are very, very low on the Wood Hollow side. Where it steps up to create some architectural interest is over on the side between the knoll and the hillside. So I can see exceeding the 35 for a feature, but I do agree that it's pretty big there, and I think that the applicant could do more to address that and mitigate that height issue. But for the most part, I think they've done a wonderful job of keeping it under the height limit along the Wood Hollow side. So while I also share that issue with the height there, I think, as we can see from colleagues here tonight, that there's two opposing. I think with my concern of height also there, if we can address that entrance issue, I think you guys can have something that moves forward here. And with respect to the wetlands, I think it's really an unmaintained property. What's going on there is not being enhanced at all. I think that doing some work and putting bioswales in that actually clean the water that go down there, I think that place could be more vibrant for plants and animals and so forth. So I'm comfortable with the application with the wetland. Obviously, it needs to go, we're not the experts on that. There's more hurdles for the applicant to go through with respect to environmental review. So really, the one thing that trips me up is also a bit of the height. And I think you've done a great job. I think you're really close. With respect to the architecture, I know the community has issues with the use, but we're here as architects, and I think you're really close.
I second a lot of what Joe just said. I think you've done a really good job, and the architecture is fine with me. The height, I think you could play a little bit more with the height, and I would support the project if the height were not such a serious issue. I think if all 5 of us were here, I think height would be a problem with all of us, because it's the way the city measures it, it's extreme. But overall, I think you've done an outstanding job. If you could, in my opinion, if you could just play with that a little bit and come back, we could go with this. That's just my opinion.
Do you want to speak any further?
It seems that we're not going to support it to go forward, so the question is of staff. Do you continue with?
Could you speak into the mic, please?
I'm sorry, this is a conversation with the staff. What is the proper procedure at this point if we're not going to provide?
Well, I guess I'd look at the applicants, if they want to, maybe we take a 5-minute recess, if they want to request a continuance in an effort to address the commission's concerns, or rather, call the question. I guess I'd like to discuss it.
Before we do that, I think it would be good to have all the members of this commission give their opinion on whether exceeding the height at all, maybe for a feature, is reasonable, unreasonable, whether they could see approving that, or whether it's a very steadfast 35 foot. I'm open to exceeding it for small features. I mean, when you design structures, there's certain things that buildings, I'm a single family residential guy, but chimneys and certain architectural features are allowed to exceed it at times, but which does add visual interest to a building. If you didn't allow any of that, what you end up happening is you get flat roofs with no articulation. So that said, I just kind of polling my fellow commissioners of their view on that, which might help out.
It'd be ridiculous to rigidly hold at 35 feet for a few features. I mean, this is 14 or 17 feet over for a large part of the building. If something went 3 or 4 feet over for a little roof or something, yeah, I'd be flexible on that. But because the intent of the height limit is to reduce massing and such, so a little bit of a gable poking through isn't going to damage that. So yeah, I wouldn't be rigid on that, yeah.
I would be less likely to be open to it, but not totally closed off. They were written for a reason. You know, there's a lot of thought put into them, and it is around trying to protect the view. So without knowing what the proposal would be, I really couldn't say. I would most likely not, unless there was a really valid reason.
One thing I want to add to that is to respond to that. I mean, if you want a little bit of a variance on a gable, you've got to do a real nice job on the other end, on the architecture, on everything else. You're asking for so many things here. You know, you're asking for the height, you're asking for setbacks over here, you're maxing the floor area ratio, you're pushing all the envelopes. So if you did some really nice work and you got one little thing over the height limit, yeah.
What setbacks are you talking about that they're
For the pond.
Oh, the wetland.
Yeah.
That's two, I have two. Height and.
Height, yeah.
What else?
Well, the other things, they're maxing the other things out. They have the absolute minimum parking, they have almost the maximum FAR, et cetera, et cetera. They're not, there's no leeway anywhere, you know, so, and like I say, the architecture do a nice job, make it welcoming when you come in, have it step out a little bit, make it all a welcoming place. I mean, when I went out there and looked at it, you know, and I want to make the project happen, I don't want to kill it, I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, boy, if they just brought everything down one floor, I know economically it won't work out, but if they brought everything down one floor, this could be a pretty nice little place out in here, you know? But it's sticking up and it's a sore thumb instead of a nice little spot.
Do you think the south side is sticking up too much?
No, it's stair stepping up, that's a good response, yeah,
I
going
mean,
from 2 to 3 to 4, yeah.
My perspective was that the entry side definitely was what.
Right.
I was very comfortable with the south side on the Wood Hollow side.
And
I thought that felt almost residential.
Only that it's maybe hurting that oak tree, would be my only concern, but I actually took photos and kind of blocked out the story poles from the Wood Hollow side, and you can see that's where it does black silhouette the sky, and as you're driving on Wood Hollow, the north end does, you know, so it's really the north end that needs the work, but
Yeah,
it's quite a bit of work, it's a lot of feet asking for it, you know, a few feet is one thing, but.
I feel as Joe about height limits. I struggle with that all the time on my project. And I'm a firm believer that you need to add interest. And I get frustrated constantly because you can't put all projects in the same box. And so if it exceeds the height limit in places, not too extremely, I would support it. So it's a good suggestion that we take a 5-minute break. So that you get out of that.
Thank you for that feedback.
Well,
Make a motion to continue the Wood Hollow project until the applicant is ready.
Is it a date certain, or is it date uncertain?
I think it's date uncertain, we renotice, we're gonna want to renotice regardless.
Okay.
It would be uncertain.
Okay.
We made a motion, yeah.
I'll second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Thank you.
Motion to continue.